You're listening to the Changing Normal podcast, where we strive to outdo the old normal and reject the new normal. And now your hosts, Owen, Dan, and Ben.
Welcome to episode 29 of the Changing Normal podcast. This is November 24th, and I'm Dan. We also have Ben here, and Owen is on the bench today. He got an unnecessary penalty, so we sent him off.
Hockey season's in full swing.
I'm actually winning my fantasy matchup this week.
No, I'm not. I'm getting slaughtered.
Fun times. So this week, we decided we wanted to hit on some of the issues around self-custody. It's kind of one of the most interesting and I think impactful topics around everything money and crypto at the moment, and something that's new to a lot of people, I guess, beyond the self-custody of like holding cash.
Right.
So that's something that I think most people can resonate with.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people say, well, yeah, I've always tried to like hold some actual cash in hand, because you never know when. I mean, just normal times, even you go to the bank and it's like, oh, the machine won't give you anymore just because it's broken or something. So we're going to dive into that, and then we got a couple stories in the news we were interested in, and we'll check and see if we have any listener feedback after that. So when it comes to the pros and cons of taking custody of your money, kind of what are the key things to think about? And I guess what even prompted us to start looking into this area? And I would have to say, for me, what prompted it is the issue of censorship of the, current mainstream financial transaction networks, and basically the banks and other financial systems. The possibility that you could be cut off from access to those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, it was just being cognizant of where the responsibility was for what controlled the funds. I mean, even if you're looking at assets, right? Like it could be just so much as having the key to the gate for your land. Like that's kind of custody of your land in a sense. But
it's living on it.
Yeah, that's the biggest one.
Yeah.
Having roots,
squatters' rights, and all that.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah. But like especially in it really came to my mind when we became exposed to Bitcoin, and then started running down that rabbit hole and realizing, okay, so if this is meant to be, an individual's sovereign money, why on earth would I leave it in a censorable location? So therefore, it's incumbent upon myself to take responsibility and take initiative, learn about how self-custody works, learn about how to be more responsible with not only this digital money, but also, oh, hey, maybe that means I can be more responsible and have a little bit more custody over other things in my life. So for me, it was the responsibility thing, and knowing that I'm the one in control, and that, well, kind of in control, I guess. It's a learning curve every day. But yeah, for me, it was responsibility, knowing that I was the one who had that, and taking more on myself.
Yeah. It's probably something that, I guess, unless you were in the Bitcoin space really early on, it's not something that's been a mainstream topic of discussion, I think, up until February, March of this year, which is interesting. When we had those moments with the Canadian trucker convoy, and we saw banks happily start freezing bank accounts. And even beyond that, crowdfunding platforms, simply being willing to basically turn into political advocacy groups and shut off the people they didn't like, which you would think in I guess a healthy society, that would be something that would doom a business to failure, is going back on their agreements.
Oh man. Yeah.
In what they and how they put themselves forward as a platform where you go to crowdfund things, and when they suddenly pick sides, you'd think that would be associated with some backlash, and but there's not a lot of sober thought as far as people that still think it's desirable for some degree of neutrality in the public space. Now it's all about well, some people have unacceptable views, as our wonderful prime minister reminds us on occasion.
And PayPal reminded us.
That too. So we find ourselves in a situation where I think this is actually a good side benefit. People are actually thinking about the issue of self-custody of money, even if they don't know about crypto, but they see the censorship issue. So I feel like without intending to, they kind of did the world a service there. And by they, I mean the Canadian government with their crackdowns. Despite the public declarations of support for protests, which apparently apply to other countries, not local protests. So it's good to see our elected politicians have the expected degree of integrity.
Right.
So I wanted to really dive into this because, well, how do I self-custody my money? And as I said, well, people are familiar with the cash experience, I guess. And it's something where you have the flip side of self-custody. You have to be able to transact peer-to-peer. Right. So cash, I have a $20 bill. I can give it to Ben. Okay, and we can have that money for goods and services swap, basically. And I guess there's still some validity in that. Well, I can take cash and I can self-custody it, and I'll still be able to trade. It's like even if my bank account got shut down, if I had a decent bit in cash, at least that's a good backup, I would say.
Yeah.
Right. Now in the future, we may see more cash being tied to, I guess, a record of its, I guess, at least in and outs of corporations and banks. I don't think they track individual serial numbers to a very high level at the moment.
Okay.
I think it's still fairly loose unless they're doing things that we don't know about.
That happens a lot.
It would require a lot of infrastructure, I think, to be added if they wanted to go that far. More likely, I think we're going to see more businesses try to refuse cash. I mean, so you go into one of the local stores like Shoppers or Walmart or whatever, and say they have one actual checkout person and the rest is all self-checkouts. I don't think they take cash. They haven't quite figured out the self-checkout with cash. I think we used to call those vending machines and banging on them to get your quarter back out.
We used to rock them in the lounge at schools. You go there, you finally got your drink out.
Well, this is something where I think Canadians having $1 and $2 coins was actually an advantage. I don't know if you've ever tried to feed an American $1 bill that's
crumpled,
had 500,000 miles on it. Try to feed it into a vending machine.
Just keeps getting spat out. Although the plastic bills we have here aren't much better. As soon as you get a solid kink in it, trying to fold it out and flatten it out to feed into a vending machine is absolutely terrible. The
crease on the polymer is a lot more of it's a lot more resilient, I guess you could say.
Just get out of it.
But you can iron it. At least I think you can.
Put it in between two sheets. I suppose that might work.
Might be like those little plastic beads you put on arranged in pegboard and then melt it into it. Anyway.
That's gracious. Peter laid that. Oh my goodness! I had a friend came to Canada to visit a while back and from Europe, and they're just like, "Oh my goodness, your guys' money is absolutely ridiculous. I can't believe it's plastic." I said, "Yeah, well, at least it survives going through the washing machine. Don't have to worry about it in the summer."
Nothing worse than paper bills looking like used Kleenex after a trip through the wallet.
Okay, so we have like cash is kind of a first step for an exposure to
I think it's
Self-custody?
on a countdown as far as its viability for self custody.
Right.
At least 100% free uncensored self custody, and we see the ability to transact with a non-digital dollar is also winding down. At a certain point, businesses are not going to want to deal with the hassle of cash. It's an extra expense and so on. And they don't even want to put people at checkouts anymore, which is understandable in a way.
It's kind of infuriating, but I get it.
Then you also have the issue of the inflation inherent with the government currency. It's like, okay, I can take that out of the bank, but it hurts me to have a large sum of it tucked under the mattress because I lose 10, 12, 15% of the value every year, at least the way things are currently looking.
There's like the having it within that trusted system of the legacy banks, even well, it doesn't mitigate the full inflationary loss, but it does allow for, if you've got a decent enough stack in there, it gives you, well, depending on how the bank accounts you have are set up, it does, you're like, okay, you lose 7%, you get a 1% or whatever. So it's only 6%, so you're kind of not really mitigating it, but
but then you have to pay tax on the 1%.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
That's quite the insult to injury, really.
Okay, here you go. 7% gone. Oh, I got 1%. You have to pay tax on that.
Capital gains tax in an inflationary environment is a disgusting level of theft.
But on the cashless thing, the trip over, I probably mentioned it before, but the trip overseas, like I was, I had plans to get, my wife loves art, so I was going to try to find like a local street vendor that had, some local paintings.
Yeah.
And on a few trips previous to this, she's found some, and she's got a little bit of a collection. Anyway, I was trying to get cash out, and I had a few connections that I hit up over in Sweden and in Norway. And I was like, hey, like, what are the chances that I'll be able to find a local painting? Like, I'm trying to get some local currency out. And they said, well, the chances of you actually finding it are pretty decent, but there's no need for you to get cash out because we don't really use cash. And I'm like, what? How do you guys not? They said, well, I can't remember which country it was, but one of them was a lot more cashless, like even small, tiny local shop owners. I mean, it's becoming more prevalent now in Canada, but there's like, the pin pad right there, and it's just like a tiny little, it looks like it's almost the size of a credit card itself, but it's got a little pin pad and you can tap and everything. And I'm thinking, holy smokes, I actually, like, I wanted to use it. Like, I wanted to see what someone would say. And they said, because my friends were like, yeah, you're going to get looked at like you've got 10 heads if you try to pay with cash. And I did. I paid. It's just this tiny little tea shop, and couldn't find any art, by the way. And I paid with cash, and they thought, it's kind of like, huh? Like that funky little eye twitch. And they're like, oh, right, I know how to do this. Anyway, they did actually have some cash in their till, but I was very, very surprised at how aggressively it seemed like they were trying to push for no cash.
Well, even without, I guess, any outside force trying to push that, I think it's the natural evolution of the technology, because the digital realm is so much more efficient that once you get to the point when failures are almost never happen, like when the reliability of those payment networks are at whatever 99.999%, and it's like the machines are everywhere, their failure rate is very low, and so on, then from a pure efficiency standpoint, it makes a lot of sense to go fully digital.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. The downsides to it is, what do you do if there's a serious system failure? I mean, you can become complacent when something works really, really well. And you expect it to always work really well, but that actually isn't a guarantee. So I could definitely see, if we move away from being, vendors, businesses basically being able to accept cash do you have any redundancy there
Mhm.
in case of a systems error? It's like, what if Visa and MasterCard go belly up for 2 days? It's like, how would we survive?
Yeah. Well, that's where a Lightning Network would come in.
Potentially. So we see a problem, and I think looking at the problem, the censorship issues, some inefficiencies with the physical item as money, and so on. The problem can be solved if we had something that we could self-custody, was digital, fully digitized, and really efficient, totally reliable, and we could still do peer-to-peer with it, even though it isn't something we hold in our hands. And I think that's where I think it's really exciting to introduce Bitcoin to people, because it's an answer to a lot of problems that I think are becoming more obvious to people than they used to be.
Mhm. Yeah, that's part of why the Lightning Network is what I'm probably most stoked about as far as like technological advancements in Bitcoin. Just it's not 100% free and it's not instantaneous, but when you think about the fact that like you're paying, if you tap with your card, like your credit card, tap with your credit card, it's going to take up to 72 hours to finalize that transaction, and it's a almost 4% fee, which is coming out of the person selling you the item. So all the credit card bonuses and whatever, like the Visa points or whatever, they come from the 3% fee. So when you can have almost near instant settlement with something that is trustless, that's so odd. Like that is what kind of like blows my brain, but is also super cool about that whole Bitcoin Lightning Network. And that's aside from the potential privacy benefits of utilizing the Lightning Network and Bitcoin and things like that.
Exactly. So getting back to the issue of self-custody, why don't we walk through like what does self-custody of Bitcoin look like? And since it's not a physical item, how do you even self-custody it? Which is kind of an interesting little subtopic even. Because I guess technically you don't actually self-custody a Bitcoin, since a Bitcoin isn't something you can hold.
Oh man.
So we really have to explain Bitcoin very briefly. And Bitcoin, of course, is a digital ledger of account. So as a ledger of account, it has record of the transactions and basically which accounts hold how much of the Bitcoin. So what the individual user can hold is what's known as a private key. And basically it acts as, I guess, the key to the safe, so to speak, if we think of it in physical terms. Basically, it's the only way to get at it. Although in the Bitcoin security and different keys, private and public, it's sort of like a safe with like a drop mailbox.
Yeah, that is
because
true.
you can drop money in if you know someone's
and anyone
public
can drop
address.
money in if you have the
yeah, it's like if I put my public address out there, people I don't even know could send Bitcoin over to it. Please do, by the way.
changingnormal at fountain.fm.
But yeah, basically that private key is necessary to actually alter that record of where which account the Bitcoin belongs to. So similar to how I would have to like log in and have security measures to get into my bank account and like send a wire or something. Basically a password, your private key is sort of like your password. Basically that's something you protect so that no one else can open up your account and send things without your permission. So most people are comfortable with holding a password. Is Bitcoin more difficult? And I would say this is where the difficulty comes in. There's no reset my password button.
There's the key no pun intended. The key to the passphrase is that you make sure it's copied down correctly and accurately, and then also stored safely, because the onus is on the individual. And this is where this whole responsibility, the individual sovereignty thing, I'm pretty sure I've said that multiple times, but just knowing that you are your backup.
Yeah, exactly. That's the part that is really the takeaway from this episode, is in a self-custody money, which Bitcoin is, you are the backups, all of the backups.
However you decide to do that, if you want to burn it in a piece of wood or stamp it in a washer or
tattoo it on your forehead. No, don't do that.
On the inside of your lip. Do it upside down so you have to look into your ear.
Oh my goodness. Even that the tattoo artist would know. See, this is where you have to.
Yeah, that's right.
You have to be thinking.
Why am I doing all these letters on the inside of this person's lip?
So going back to, I have an online bank account. I don't really have self-custody of it, in that the whole system and all the backups are in the hands of my bank. My bank is basically what we would call a trusted third party in that situation. And they're someone, I guess, outside of the people I interact with, but they have to be basically the in-between. So a third party. And not only are they the in-between on transactions, such as when I send an email money transfer from my account to Ben's account, they're also custodying any money I give them. So my savings account, they also control my checking account for all the automatic withdrawals and deposits. So basically, I've hired them on to take care of all of these risks. Or I guess responsibilities for managing, responsibilities and risks, because taking on a responsibility of custody does come with risks. I mean, it's the same with custody of Bitcoin. It's not risk-free.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So we just have to understand the relative responsibilities and risks and look at that trade-off and see which is best. And it's not all one way or the other. I haven't closed all my bank accounts simply because I have some Bitcoin now.
Just got to figure out a way to use fiat and get Bitcoin in return for it. Thanks, Shake Pay.
So I take responsibility for custody of my Bitcoin. So how does that start, I guess?
Custody and responsibility for my Bitcoin.
Well, moving it off the exchange. Explain that for us.
Words out of my mouth. So that would involve, getting a non-custodial wallet. So there are wallets where either, they would mostly be software that would be custodial, but non-custodial or self-custody wallets. Some really easy ones. One we recommend a lot just because it's relatively smooth user interface is Exodus. There are some other ones that do like the simple Bitcoin wallet that uses a lot of BIP terminology, but it's super simple to work with. There's Moon, Phoenix.
Yeah, and Moon being a Bitcoin only wallet.
Yeah. So simple
Bitcoin
we've
talked about
Bitcoin only.
Yeah, doing like a review of that and seeing if a simpler Bitcoin only wallet makes a lot more sense for beginners. So we'll save that for a future episode.
Stand by. So that then a self-custodial wallet is going to give you, it's going to generate, and that depends on whether you choose a hardware or software. So hardware is something like a Trezor or a Ledger or a Cold Card, which is made here in Canada. One of the best ones, actually. I need to get one. But what it does is it will generate a passphrase, so that private key, and that private key is technically just a jumble of randomly generated characters. But then what the wallet does is assign either a 12 or a 24 word phrase that allows you to interact with the Bitcoin on the ledger. So then that is where you copy down the the passphrase, so either all 12 or all 24 words, and that is what gives you the private access to interact with the Bitcoins. But that software hardware wallet also generates a public address in the ledger, and that public address is what you want to input into the send function on the exchange to get it off the exchange and into your custody. And so that's kind of the nuts and bolts of the first steps of self-custody, getting it off the exchange.
Yep. So that 12 or 24 word phrase, and I guess there's a lot of terms for that now. You might call it a backup phrase, you might call it a seed phrase, you might call it a mnemonic phrase,
and depending on who you ask,
mnemonic seed phrase, or some combination.
the Bitcoin purists are like, oh, it's technically not a wallet, it's a key signer or a seed signer. And I was like, oh my goodness, and no, wallet is easier for my brain to remember right now.
So I like just saying backup phrase because that makes the purpose very clear. Seed phrase is maybe not quite as clear.
Yeah.
So that backup phrase. So this is really the key to the self-custody responsibility. Since the bank is not custodying your money, they don't have backup systems, they don't have that nice little reset password button where you can prove who you are and reset your password and get back into your account. If you lose access to your wallet, you need that backup phrase. It's absolutely essential. And so that means how many layers of backups is something you also have to decide. So it's like I can start by paper. So I got a 12-word seed phrase on my soft wallet, and I write them down. So word 1, word 2, write it down. Word 3, 1 to 12. Spelling correctly is also essential.
Not my strongest suit, but it happens.
So you do that, and then you have to secure it, get basically from other people, getting a hold of that written copy of your seed phrase. So, written on paper in a safe. And then you kind of get into, I guess, extra techniques, stamping or engraving in steel, for example, so that there's a certain level of fire protection and flood protection. The paper doesn't usually hold up to water or fire. So it's something worth considering. Maybe even splitting copies of it up with people you trust to have half of your backup phrase. Something like that. I don't know. Bury it in a treasure chest in your backyard and make a nice treasure map. It's on my list. Bucket list item is creating an elaborate treasure map.
Open it up.
I never had
piece of paper. What? What was he thinking? You shine the black light over. It's like, oh, we wrote it in lemon juice or blood. I can't.
I'd probably go with the metal stamping or engraving for the treasure chest. I would say.
Oh my word.
So I think that is the most essential need to know part of the self-custody aspect. You have to keep it safe, and you have to have as many layers or as many copies in as many formats as is appropriate for the amount of funds that you have and the level of security you want. So I guess that's part of, the responsibility of self-custody is you have to figure out what level of risks and how much security is, like how many copies, backup copies, and how many locations do you need. So that's really something that the individual user has to decide what's appropriate for them. So that's more difficult than when I went to the bank and they have decided, and hopefully they've done it correctly, I've never checked up on them, how many levels of security and how many backups they have of their records.
Right.
Like, I actually have no idea how many backup servers my bank has with the record of all the transactions and so on. I would assume it's at least 4.
Well, because 2 is 1 and 1 is none. So, I mean, yeah, you would hope it'd be 4. They're holding an innumerable amount of money on innumerable amount of people's accounts. Yeah.
Again, that's something where you come back to that phrase, trusted third party, actually have no oversight over their security or over their systems. I guess you just take it for granted. It's like it's a brand that's been around forever, so you assume they're going to keep rolling along and doing business the expected way. So it's probably not a basket that you want all your eggs in when you really can't see everything. And similar when it comes to Bitcoin, don't dump all your eggs in when you don't fully understand it. This is something you want to start small and go through that learning curve and really work to understand the whole system and the responsibility you're taking on when you do self-custody. Because I think there's probably nothing worse than losing access to your Bitcoin.
I panic enough when I can't remember a password to like an email address. When I go back, I'm like, okay, it's written down like this. Bum, 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 bum. Didn't work. Oh boy. Yeah, the Bitcoin like just being certain of knowing your backups, knowing where they are, who you may have entrusted them with, and actually, I mean, I know that I've heard you say it. I actually haven't done it myself, so shame on me. But having some, like when someone sets up a new wallet, like it's like, okay, now delete the wallet and restore it, and make sure that you go through the proper procedure of actually restoring it through your backup phrase. And
yeah, that's a really good point, because there's nothing that beats the hands-on experience. I mean, you can learn the theory of how the backup works, but I think that's really the best thing. It's like once you've got, that 20 or $50 in your first Bitcoin software wallet, it's like actually test that. It's like delete the wallet or delete the app or whatever and go through the process of getting it back after you write the backup phrase down. Don't delete the app before you write the backup phrase down, please.
Well, no, the guys on the Changing Normal podcast said I could do that. Just delete the app and then try to restore it. Make sure you have the backup phrase down correctly.
And running through this test, basically, when it's still a small amount, I think is a really useful exercise. So, and again, at the same time you first get a hardware wallet, it's run through that step of doing a backup, taking down the backup, which with a hardware wallet is usually 24 words. Recording that, wiping the device. I did that with a ledger, which you can actually totally wipe it by inputting the PIN incorrectly 3 times. It automatically wipes itself.
Nice.
Yeah. Extra security feature.
Cool.
Which I think is pretty valuable because you don't want anybody. Well, I can't imagine trying to brute force an 8-digit PIN with little mechanical buttons.
I will say I do like that about the ledgers. It's like it's not like you just boom, 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 boom. It's you gotta actually be quite precise and meticulous about how you go about it.
Yep. So, new to it, when you're new to a hardware wallet, go ahead and do that. When you have a little bit in it, figure out if you can actually restore it successfully. Best way to learn.
Yep. Exactly. Sometimes the school of hard knocks is the best way to learn, but the hands-on. I would much rather learn through the hands-on of a small amount than not having actually like, oh, that's kind of where I stored everything, and this backup phrase doesn't seem to be working anymore. I got something wrong here.
Yep. So if you have any other points, questions maybe related to self-custody, something you think we didn't hit on, or you just listen to that and you have a question, go ahead and you can post a comment on one of our social medias or send us an email. It's changingnormal@protonmail.com, and we do love feedback, so shoot us an email if you want. And I think this is probably, the wallet is something we will definitely be coming back to, because I'm definitely interested in as easy a user interface as possible. And while I really like Exodus, at this point, they're doing so many awesome things that maybe the app has too many buttons for a beginner who wants a very stripped down interface.
Mhm.
So this is something I think we should do a show on in the future.
Well, and I mean, even it's for me, it's also more just the fact that they also, I mean, I understand that, a lot of people have belief in other, altcoin projects and stuff, but I enjoyed just the Bitcoin only because it doesn't drag me down the rabbit hole of dollar go up. Like you're not checking in every day, seeing how many of your different alts are like, oh,
how many of them are not going to
well,
moon?
actually, yeah, sorry. Nose diving to the ground. But yeah, it's just, it's a simple just log in, get your public address, because hopefully most wallets are generating new public addresses. Send it in, and then I mean there are some that are just I think Swan Bitcoin does like an automatic withdrawal to a wallet that generates a new public address, and it handles it. Somehow they have the script all done into the website. Like I can't remember what exactly, it's an XPub or something like that you have to give them, and it just does everything for an automatic withdrawal, and it generates a new public address. Anyway, we're really getting in the weeds on that one. But on the feedback note, the Canadian farmstead boosted 100 sats on our last episode.
Oh, nice. Thank you.
Financial iceberg. And it's kind of funny because they said, as the fan of the podcast, it is incumbent on me to say that the What We Did This Week segment is a fan favorite. I think referencing the fact that I commented that the What We Did This Week is a fan favorite segment. But thank you very much for that. Hopefully this is an entertaining source of information.
So let's hit on a couple of news stories. After filtering out all the useless chaff.
Oh my word. And of course everything's left or right leaning. Like it's just a complete dichotomy of what news story you want to look at. It's like, oh, do you want to do it through the Daily Wire? Or do you want to do it through CNN? And then it's,
which form of indoctrination would you like today?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm feeling a little left. Let's go CNN. Actually, it's funny I said that. I need to remember how Jack Spirko said to get past a paywall. There's a website that he said that you just punch in the URL for a paywall article, because I would love to read more of what this article is.
Okay.
Now, I mean, I could just pay for a subscription to their service because it actually is providing value to me. So I could provide a little bit of value back. But the Daily Wire was talking about the San Francisco police and how they've got robots in their department that they are going to introduce a policy that's going to grant the robots a license to kill. So immediately I thought Captain America 2, the Winter Soldier, where they're preemptively, they're surveilling on everyone's, bank records and travel history and purchase history. And then they're, they've got these great big airships that are going to target them. And I'm thinking, okay, we're like getting into like dystopian future already with these. But then I was thinking, okay, why are we? It was nuance was the word that came to mind when I thought about it, because when you have an officer on the ground, there's a lot more nuance in a situation that a human being need. Now, I mean, maybe quantum computing and AI is going to blow us away at some point. I don't know. I highly doubt that. But the nuance that an officer can read on the ground makes me think that maybe giving a robot a license to kill, because it's basically what it is it's saying
this
that
is more I really wonder if this is more about like legal liability and authorization issues.
Well, very well.
Currently, I assume this would be a controlled robot. If you're talking about one that has, I don't know, I would hope we're not at the place where they're willing to give robots guns.
Oh my goodness, you would hope so. But
I could see if you're using more tools besides simply the bomb disposal robot, which is a really cool machine. If you're going beyond that, you could get into situations where interactions, can lead to accidental fatalities.
right.
So that will definitely be interesting. I think it is something worth watching, and whether the person is on the ground or controlling it the way the Predator drones are shooting missiles at people, and somebody can control that from Colorado or wherever. Typically, I think it's still people running the controls,
which is what it is. I actually got behind the paywall. But it's they're remote controlled robots, and they're typically used for defusing bombs. So the only use action that they're going to see according to the policy is that, and I quote, robots will only be used as a deadly force option when risk of loss of life to members of the public or officers is imminent and outweighs any other force option available to the SFPD.
So I could imagine a hypothetical scenario where you had someone with a bomb, perhaps, and if you can get your little tracked robot to actually restrain them, that could be a potentially fatal situation. There are so many ways that could go bad. It's like, is this a thriller movie or is it a comedy?
Oh yeah. But that was, yeah, like I said, the nuance in a situation that a human being is able to interact with, but knowing, like I said before, I couldn't get behind the paywall. I figured it out. Knowing that it's not relying on AI, it's relying on people controlling the robot. It makes it a little bit less dystopian, I guess.
Definitely interesting. Okay, the story I wanted to highlight this week, the headline was Tennessee judges uphold contentious school voucher law. So this was really interesting to me, and kind of the little overview was Tennessee passed the school voucher law in 2019, I believe, and it's been held up in court ever since. Critics sued and basically said, well, this will harm school districts and take away money from them, to which I'm sure the proponents said, that's not a bug, that's a feature.
100%.
But anyway, finally, judges said that their claims that this would cause harm to the school districts was totally speculative, and I guess the writers of this bill even went so far as to say the money would be replaced, and that school districts actually wouldn't lose the money for students who took a voucher and went to a private school or some version thereof, which is actually something I disagree with, because I think that money should in its entirety follow the student, and that the parents should be able to enroll their children in whatever school they choose, and that if money is going to be coming from the government, then that should be a lump sum that goes to the school that is actually teaching the child.
Right.
Because currently, whether your children go to school or not, go to the government school or not, your taxes are contributing to that, same as everyone else's, despite the fact that you're not getting that service. Probably because it's not a service that performs up to what you think is best for your children.
Yeah.
And so actually getting your tax dollars back to direct them to your kids' education is, I think, a huge win. So hopefully this is something Tennessee can now roll out, now that there is at least a certain level of court decision. Of course, you never know appeals and all that, where this might go, but this is definitely something I want to see more of.
Yeah, it'd be because I think you mentioned before we started recording that it's also part of did you say the Free State?
The Free State project, and I guess the associated caucus in the House of Representatives in New
Okay.
Hampshire. This is something, I'm not sure what stage they're at, but this was something they were working on,
Mhm.
is school voucher legislation.
Just look and see if the folks who are starting to work on the Free New Brunswick I don't know if they call it the Free Province Project or not, but see if that's something that's on their radar. Because I know that New Brunswick has a large, and even the Maritimes, a large proponent of homeschool groups, and a lot of work has been put into that, in in phases of memorandums of understandings with secondary institutions of education, legal defense, things like that. Like I know my parents were very active in a lot of those parts of the whole homeschool board, and working interprovincially, trying to get things kind of ironed out, and not just ironed out, but in like working order, and headed in that direction.
Yep. At the core of this issue, it really comes back to that, I guess, the nature of bureaucracy and having no choice is that quality is going to just go downhill when you can't choose, when there's only one supplier. So free market, opening up choices, that means you actually have to competitively, go after students like they're your customers instead of just a commodity. I mean, imagine that if you had to be the best school to get students to enroll, provide the best value, instead of, well, you have to come here. This is the school district you live in. You have no choice, the way it is in many places. So, I mean, just think about that. Which system is going to lead to the best outcomes for the students and not the teachers' union? So now that I've taken the swing at that, which is worse, unions that no longer serve the best interests of their communities, or potential dystopian AI robot with a license to kill?
Just let me have self-custody. I'll be fine. Self-custody of everything.
Self-custody your Bitcoin. You can transfer peer-to-peer on the Bitcoin network, and you cannot be censored currently. And actually, Bitcoin is getting more secure and more efficient, more user-friendly, more private all the time.
Before we got rolling, I was reading an article on Bitcoin Magazine about what the future is going to look like, or it's an opinion piece, but basically they're just going to regulate all the onboards. They're going to create a paper IOU system for gold, or I say gold reserves because I'm so used to hearing about how fiat cash came in, and it was like, IOU for a gold reserve, paper IOU for Bitcoin reserves, and then Bitcoin, and then there's going to be like a dual Bitcoin economy. The one where the paper IOUs are for the Bitcoin, and then there's the people who are running nodes, like running coin joins, and Bitcoin is freedom money, or using air quotes for those listening to the audio, quote unquote freedom money, or quote unquote black market money, and letting Bitcoin be what it was meant to be, which is just freedom. And anyway, but that was that was part of it, and just I just laughed. It's like, oh, that's kind of funny.
Yeah. Well, I think we'll be doing a Bitcoin meetup over Zoom next month.
Yeah, hopefully.
So that's something we'll have to think about scheduling at some point soon. So that'll be, I don't know, probably Tuesday evening or something. So if Bitcoin is something you're interested in, even if you haven't started yet, if you have started, want to learn a bit more, or even if you feel like you're an expert and just want to chat with us.
Sometimes those ones are really fun.
Yeah. So if you're not in our I guess the crypto chat group that we run. Get in that so you can get access to the link when we post that.
Hit us up via email, changingnormal@protonmail.com. We can get you linked up there, or just comment on any of our socials, any of the platforms, Fountain, YouTube, Odysee. I think, you could leave a review on Google or Spotify. I guess Spotify's just a rating, so 5-star only on those ones. But and then there's also iTunes as well. So
right on. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up, and thanks for listening. So get out there, be courageous, and change your normal every day.
Happy Thanksgiving to all of
Yeah,
our American
happy Turkey
listeners.
Day.